So in the previous lesson, we learned how to factor quadratics using the GCF, and I mentioned how that is the first step to factoring. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about how to factor further, particularly how to factor quadratics. So what I have written up here are basically the step-by-steps, and it's a little bit wordy, so I think what's easier is to kind of just see it be done. And really with factoring, just the more you practice, the better you're going to get at it. So I'm going to walk through this example. So the example is completely factor 21x squared plus 57x minus 180. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check for a GCF and we're going to write it in standard form. So to check for a GCF, we need to look at each of our coefficients and see what's the largest number that goes into all of those, and instead of writing out all the factors. If you can't see it right away, what you need to do is write out all the factors of 21, all the factors of 57, all the factors of 108, and see what's the biggest number that goes into all three. So if you do that, the largest factor is going to be 3, which means our GCF is 3. So remember, to factor using GCF, we divide each of our terms by 3, and I'm going to write the answer down here. So the GCF goes out in front, and then we divide everything by 3. So 21 divided by 3 is 7x squared. 57 divided by 3 is 19, so 19x, and then negative 108 divided by 3 is negative 36. So from the previous lesson, we would be done. However, now we need to look at our leftover, and if it's quadratic, we should be able to factor it more. So remember, quadratic is when there's an exponent of 2. So to factor this, we're going to use the box, and remember, when we use the box to multiply, we write the numbers on the outside, and then we get the inside, and then we simplify, but we're starting with the inside, so we're going to write this quadratic on the inside. So the quadratic goes across a diagonal, so 7x squared. This is positive 19x, and then negative 30x. Remember, every time we use the box, these two numbers, they add to make the middle term. Okay, so that's why I'm writing this middle term right here. All right, so now step 3, in order to factor, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply a and c. So a is a number in front of x squared, and c is the constant term. So we're going to do 7 times negative 36. So this is 7 times negative 36, and we get negative 252. And then at the bottom, we're going to write whatever b is. So we're trying to make 19. All right, so now we need to think about, now what we're going to do is we're going to list out our factor pairs of whatever AC is. So something that we need to think about is, since we're trying to multiply to make a negative number, that basically tells me that one of my factors has to be positive and the other has to be negative, which means when we put them in the box, one of these has to be positive, the other has to be negative. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to list out our factor pairs of 252. And this is a large number, but if you're using your calculator, this should be fairly straightforward. So it's going to be 1, 252, 2, 126, 3 and 84, 4 and 63, 5 doesn't go in, but 6 goes in 42 times. There's 7 and 36. 8 doesn't go in, but 9 does, 9 and 28, 12 and 21, and 14 and 18. So even though that's a lot of factor pairs, you still should be able to list them out fairly quickly. So what we're looking for in this step, okay, right now we're at step 5, we're going to find the pair that adds to make B. So remember, since one's positive, one's negative, we're actually looking for a pair that's going to subtract to make B. Okay, because they're going to be opposite signs. So really they're subtracting. So scanning our list, 1 and 252, that's not going to work. 2 and 126, no. 3 and 84, that would make 81. 6 and 63, no. 6 and 42, no. 7 and 36, so we're getting closer. 9 and 28 is going to work. Okay, in order to make a positive 19, that means my bigger number needs to be positive. So it's going to be positive 28 and negative 9. And just to double check, we should make sure that these two numbers are going to multiply to make negative 252, and these two are going to add to make 19. Or you can think of it as subtracting. 28 minus 9 is 19. 28 times negative 9 is negative 252. So once we find our magic pair, those go inside the box. So this is going to be positive 28 and this is going to be negative 9. Okay, and then now what we need to do is we need to find the outside. Okay, so we need to find the numbers that go on the outside. In order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to find the GCF of each row and each column. So looking at our first row, 7x squared and negative 9x. 7 and 9, the biggest number they have in common is 1, but they both have an x. Okay, the next row, 28x and negative 36, the biggest number they have in common is a positive 4. And then looking down the row, 7x squared and 28x, that's 7x. And then negative 9x and negative 36, they have a 9 in common, but since our leading term is negative, we are going to factor out a negative 9. Okay, last thing we should do is we should check each box to make sure it multiplies out correctly. So I'm going to do 7x times x, that's 7x squared, so that's good. Negative 9 times x is negative 9x squared. 7x times 4 is 28x, and negative 9 times 4 is negative 36. And then last thing, we should check that these two boxes add up to make 19x, and 28x plus negative 9x, that is going to be 19x, so that's good too. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to write our answer as two binomials, and don't forget about the GCF. So our GCF is 3 out in front, and now we've broken down this quadratic into two factors, so 7x minus 9 and x plus 4. All right, let's look at another example. Okay, so completely factor 3x squared minus 19x plus 28. First thing we do is we look for a GCF. Well, 3, 19, and 28 don't have anything in common, so there's no GCF, which means we're going to go straight to trying to factor this since it's a quadratic. So this goes across a diagonal, 3x squared, negative 19x plus 28. And then we're going to multiply AC, so 3 times 28 is 84. And then we're adding to make B, which is negative 19. So in this case, we're multiplying to make a positive number, which means my signs have to either be plus plus or minus minus. Those are the only ways we can multiply to make a positive. Since we're adding to make a negative number, that means both our signs are going to be negative. So inside the boxes here, these are both going to be negative. All right, now we need to list out our factors of 84. Starting with 1, it's going to be 1 and 84, 2 and 42, 3 and 28, 4 and 21, and 6 and 14. Oh, and last one, 7 and 12. So since the signs are the same, we're looking for the two numbers that add to make 19, and that's going to be 7 and 12. Once we have our numbers here, we should just double check. Negative 7 times negative 12 is positive 84. Negative 7 plus negative 12 is negative 19. So now we know we have our two factor pairs. So this is going to be negative 7, negative 12, and it actually doesn't matter which one goes where since the signs are both the same. And now to get our numbers on the outside, we're going to take the GCF of each row and each column. So starting with the top row, 3x squared and negative 12x, they have a 3 in common and an x. Negative 7x and positive 28, since our leading term is negative, we know it has to be negative, and 7 goes into 7 and 28. And then we're going to do our rows, or our columns. 3x squared and negative 7x, the only thing they have in common is x. And then we have negative 12x and positive 28, so a negative since the leading term is negative, and 4 goes into both of those. Then we should check using multiplication. So 3x times x is 3x squared, negative 4 times 3 is negative 12x, x times negative 7 is negative 7x, negative 4 times negative 7 is positive 28, and then check that the two diagonals add to make the middle, and since they do, we know that our factors are correct. So this is going to be 3x minus 7 and x minus 4. All right, I'm going to go through one more example. So this is 9x squared minus 78x minus 27. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look for a GCF, and 3 is our GCF. So we're going to rewrite this by factoring out our GCF first. So we're going to divide everything by 3. We end up with 3x squared minus 26x minus 9. And since our leftover is quadratic, we're going to be able to factor that more. So we write it across our diagonal. Then we're going to multiply AC, so that's going to be negative 27. And then B goes here, negative 26. Since we're multiplying to make a negative number, that means our signs have to be opposite. That's the only way we can multiply to make a negative number. So one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. And now we're going to list out our factors. So factors of 27, that's 1 and 27, and 3 and 9. Since we have opposite signs, we're really looking for the two numbers that subtract to make B, and that's going to be 1 and 27. So we need to make a negative 26, which means our bigger number needs to be negative. So this is going to be 27, and this is going to be 1. Before we put it in the box, we should double check. 1 times negative 27 is negative 27, and 1 plus negative 27 is negative 26. So we're good. Our factors are correct. So this is 1x and negative 27x. And now we find the outside by looking for the GCF. So starting with the top row, 3x squared and negative 27x. 3x is our GCF. Then going down, 1x and negative 9. The only thing they have in common is a 1. And then we look at our rows. So 3x squared and 1x. The only thing they have in common is an x. And then we have negative 27x and negative 9. They have a negative 9 in common. Before we write out our answer, we should double check our boxes. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times negative 9 is negative 27x. X times 1 is 1x. Negative 9 times 1 is negative 9. And then just double check that these two numbers add to make the middle, which is 26x. That's good. So now we have our answer. So GCF goes out in front, and now we can write our factors, x minus 9 and 3x plus 1.